I'm Susan Huckle. Today on LA Currents, we hear from the U.S. Department of Labor, the federal department fighting for better labor policies, including giving mental health conditions the same recognition as physical ones. Later, Maria Hall Brown went on site to meet the leader of the Watts Labor Community Action Committee, a grassroots organization which has become synonymous with lifting up Watts. But first, the city administrative officer is the principal financial advisor to both the mayor and the city council, and the best placed person to answer as to how the city is doing financially. Maria Hall Brown gets a full account from the city administrative officer, Matt Szabo.
Well, an advisor provides guidance, support, resources, and today we have someone who is quite the amazing advisor. I'm delighted to be joined today by the Los Angeles City Administrative Officer, Matt Szabo. Nice to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so I just gave you this huge responsibility in terms of the City of Los Angeles and your office advising the mayor and the city council, but literally, what are the parameters of the office? Because it seems very, very complicated looking out, looking in.
Right, well, thank you. It's very nice to be here. The primary job of the CAO is to be the principal financial advisor to the mayor and the council. So in that area of responsibility, we assist the mayor in developing the annual budget. We assist the council in reviewing and approving the annual budget. We are responsible for making revenue projections for the various sources of revenue that the city brings in. And we bring in a number of sources of revenue, not just property tax, but business tax, sales tax, hotel tax, et cetera. We need to make projections on that. We monitor how the revenue is coming in versus plan. Because the majority of the money we spend is on employees to deliver services, police, firefighters, rec assistants, et cetera, 80% of what we spend is on employees.
Right now, it's not a big surprise, but the city's in a fiscal crisis. So what is happening in that regard?
There's a couple of factors that are contributing to the city's current financial status. And principally, it is, I would argue that we are still in the echo of the impact of what happened during the COVID pandemic. And what I mean by that, yes, the pandemic is behind us, thankfully, but it had such a significant impact on the economy that the corresponding and subsequent inflation that took place after the shutdown, that built up demand, that built up savings, that also restricted supply, and then we had an overabundance of demand and not enough supply, a dearth of supply, and that led to significant inflation. The federal government comes in and increases interest rates in an effort to slow the economy, and that has worked. Inflation has come down, but at the expense of lower levels of spending. So the city, of course, our main source of revenue is property tax, but we also receive significant revenue from business tax, from sales tax, from hotel taxes, from taxes on sales of property. There is good news on those fronts. Inflation is down, interest rates are down, so the runway looks good. The economic indicators are good for the city, but for right now, we're having to deal with softening revenue at a time that we've also seen upward pressure on wages.
So what happens if, in fact, you get to the crisis stage?
Budget control is a critical and principal role. But what I mean by budget control is it isn't just about setting an annual budget, but it's about making assessments and providing recommendations to the mayor and the council over the course of the year to make corrections
Sure.
if we're off course. So we will be making recommendations to the mayor and the council on strategies to protect the reserve fund, to grow the reserve fund back up to our financial policy minimum of 5%. There are various ways we can do that. Principally, we just need to stay within budget. The mayor and the council made a decision that it was important to be able to expand or at least hire up to the authorized level at LAPD. LAPD has been losing officers for the last several years, and now whereas it was in 2020 at 10,000, it is now below 9,000. And that also, by the way, although it does yield savings, savings to the city when we're paying for fewer officers. Because you have fewer officers, it also puts upward pressure on overtime. So you have fewer officers working more hours. Overtime is time and a half. So that doesn't work for the city financially either. The mayor and council made a decision to compensate officers in a manner commensurate with our surrounding agencies. That was also a very expensive decision, but it was also a policy decision. And the same goes for the level of compensation to our civilian employees. Those were essentially policy decisions. So what we are able to do beyond that, until the revenue picture turns around, will be limited, and so we'll make recommendations to the mayor and the council. You ask the question, well, why do we care about the reserve fund? The reserve fund is there to take care of contingency. There's always going to be reasons that you need to spend more money than you expect. Emergencies arise. There can be over expenditures in areas like overtime because we haven't hired as much as we have, and so our overtime costs are going to be more than anticipated. And we need a contingency. It's a important part of any sound financial plan to have a significant contingency. We clearly need to do work with policymakers and the city attorney to make investments in the areas where we are seeing the highest number of lawsuits and payouts due to judgments and settlements. What does the city do? The city provides police, provides firefighters, provides everything. If you walk outside and if you essentially look at anything that isn't privately owned, that's the city. The trees, the sidewalks, the street lights, the roads, the crosswalks. The city is all responsible for that. The basic city services, the parks, the zoo, the libraries, and we do need to look at strategies to ensure that we're not spending so much money on lawsuits so that we can direct those dollars towards those basic services.
You have been in public service for a very long time. You've been with a lot of different offices, and now you're in this particular office. What is it about being part of the city and the workings of the city that drew you in the first place and keeps you motivated?
As it relates to government, I think it's such a privilege to work in local government because you have the opportunity to literally see and feel the results of your work in a way that you may not at the federal level. And well, I'm not comparing what's better or worse. It's a benefit of working in local government. What people care about in their day-to-day lives: is it safe to get to work? What does our street look like? Do we have a safe park to go to? Is the fire department going to respond when we call? The basic everyday quality of life issues is what the city of LA is ultimately responsible for.
How do you feel about the city of Los Angeles? Is it moving in the right direction?
I'm definitely optimistic. I do think we're moving in the right direction. Clearly the city has a lot of challenges, but there are significant opportunities. Obviously, we have the Olympics coming in 2028. We've got the Super Bowl in 27, the World Cup in 26. LA is in so many ways the center of the universe for an urban center, and again, it's a privilege to work in a city that means so much to so many. And yes, it's recovering from COVID, has presented challenges as it has across the country, particularly in downtowns. But this is a resilient city, and we've got great leadership from the mayor and the council. There is a focus on dealing with and addressing homelessness like there has never been, and a commitment to solving the crisis. And that really is, in my view, the key to unlocking the potential of the city. And I think the commitment is there.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if people want to learn more, what's the best way for them to understand what's happening in your office?
They can go to our city website, which is cao.lacity.gov.
Whether at work or preparing for retirement, U.S. workers are fighting stress and mental health concerns. Ali Khawar tells Natalia Bilbao how the U.S. Department of Labor protects employee benefits, how it is supporting workers' mental and physical health, and how new policies will help everyone contributing to a retirement fund.
Hello, I'm Natalia Bilbao, and this is LA Currents. Whether you're about to join the workforce, are a senior employee, or are just about to retire, having knowledge of your health and retirement benefits is crucial. But who promotes and protects these benefits? I'm excited to be joined by the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Employee Benefits Security Administration, EBSA, of the U.S. Department of Labor, Ali Khawar. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
Ali.
having me.
How would you describe what the U.S. Department of Labor and the EBSA in particular does?
So if you think of the US system, people that have their benefits through their employment, whether it's things like a 401k or a traditional defined benefit pension, and you're employed by the private sector, so not state or local government, then generally you're under our jurisdiction. And so we're the primary regulator, and our job is several-fold to make sure that those plans are being operated correctly and taking care of the people that they're supposed to take care of, but also educating the public, educating the people that are running the plans, and then we write rules and there's a policy-making function as well.
What type of work do you do with international organizations?
The fundamental question that we're asking ourselves is, do we have the best system possible? What are the things that other people are doing that we can learn from? So, we might talk to the Australians about an initiative that they're doing. Some of the problems that we face in the US are not unique to us. Across the world, almost every developed economy and almost every country is facing an aging population, which means that birth rates are falling and the average age of the population is getting older and older. How you think about making sure that enough people are covered by things like the 401k, have enough health insurance, how they're going to take advantage of those benefits in old age. And so there's a lot that we can gain from having those conversations and a lot that people can learn from our conversations as well.
What do you find is the biggest challenge currently in your role?
One issue is that we're a very, very small agency. We have less than 1,000 people. The kinds of arrangements that I was mentioning, there are about 4 million of them, roughly, in the US. So we have under 1,000 people, we have responsibility for 4 million of these arrangements, and there are trillions and trillions of dollars in assets. Depending on what piece you're looking at, there's up to $40 trillion. Being so small, how can we make sure that we're having the maximum impact? The big part of that goes back to what I was saying about public education, right? Making sure that the public is aware of what their rights are, that employers are aware of what their obligations are, that we're making those things as plainly understandable as possible, and that people know that they have this resource in the U.S. Department of Labor that's there and available to help.
How did it feel for you to be named by President Joe Biden as Acting Assistant Secretary in March of 2021?
It was an exciting moment for me. I have been working in this area for a long time, and I'm very familiar with the agency's work. But to take on that role at a really critical time in the juncture of the U.S., but also of my agency, we were also, like everyone else, in the midst of COVID at that time. We were doing a lot of work around COVID, around how people can pay or not pay, as the case was ultimately for vaccines. Finding benefits from that COVID period is hard, but one of the things that I believe is that I think it opened a window in which there was a level of openness and acceptance of mental health conditions not being, at worst kind of a reflection on the caliber of that human being,
right?
But a disease just like any other, right? We don't tend to judge someone if they have a heart attack or if they break their leg.
You have a video that's really informative, actually, that like showcases 2 cases of different workers. One has diabetes, and he's kind of follows like the normal route, and nobody questions anything.
Right.
It's covered. And then when somebody claims they have like a substance abuse problem or addiction problem, then that's a whole other ballgame.
It's suddenly their fault. But the truth is, these are diseases just like any other.
Right.
And there's been a law in place actually for over a decade. It's called the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. It stands for a pretty fundamental proposition that if the condition you're seeking treatment for is a mental health condition or a substance use condition, it shouldn't be treated differently just because it's that condition. What we found, truly unfortunately, is that for many people in the US that have health insurance coverage, that pretty simple proposition, that simple promise that it shouldn't matter, wasn't the case. That it did matter. That you had to jump through additional hoops, that you had to, cut through additional red tape for no reason except you're trying to get treatment for a mental health condition or a substance use condition. And the part that really I think I found the most bothersome is that, I'm a parent, and a lot of what you saw during the pandemic, and one of the things that did change a little bit, is there was, in addition to the mental health epidemic, there was a teen mental health epidemic, and particularly body image issues, and particularly around adolescent females. You can imagine as a parent how hard it is for your child to have any health condition, and how much that distracts you, the stress that you have with that. But then on top of that, if when you're reaching out for help, you now have to fight again and again and again, a system that is designed to say no and not help you get the care that your child needs. That really is not the way that the system should work. And so we've been working to try and address that as much as possible. A lot of what we would see, you mentioned diabetes earlier, that people would be able to, middle-aged men could get nutritional counseling for diabetes, but teenage girls that had an eating disorder couldn't get nutritional counseling, that it would be just fundamentally excluded. We're not going to cover nutritional counseling for that. Things like that, children with autism not being able to get access to ABA therapy. Those kinds of things really, really bothered us. The other one that really sticks out in my head is individuals that had opioid disorders. Part of the treatment plan there is very typically testing to make sure that you haven't relapsed. And we would find instance after instance where urinalysis, testing your urine to see if you've taken a substance, wasn't covered, even though it is for any number of conditions. So we've been really trying to do that. The new rule that we put out focuses on the core issue of ensuring that this parity exists between medical and mental health.
So we've covered health coverage. Let's talk about retirement, because I know how important the retirement security rule is for your department. And can you tell me a little bit more about it? What type of protections are you putting in place to secure this?
So when you look at the US system, many people are not covered. About half the population doesn't have coverage. For the people that are able to save through their workplace, one issue that we've seen and have been trying to address for a number of years is that when you're in this 401k system, you're asked to make a lot of decisions about, how much should you save, what should you invest in, ultimately how should you withdraw the money when you retire. It's different than the defined benefit, the traditional pension, right? You showed up to work, you worked, and at the end you got a paycheck for life. That's not the reality for most Americans today. We've just told them, you're now responsible for these decisions. If you make the wrong decision, that's kind of on you. And so the natural thing for most people to do is, well, I don't know anything about this. Who can I talk to that does know about it? And that's where the really important role of financial advisors comes in. The problem is that for most of those financial advisors, they don't have a legal obligation to be putting your interests first. So they could, for example, be recommending that you invest in a stock, a mutual fund, and the product that they recommend you invest in, they're recommending perhaps because it's going to earn them a higher commission. So the rule that we've worked on is really, it's a pretty basic proposition, that when you're getting that kind of advice from someone, when they're telling you that they're going to look out for you, and everything about that relationship is about putting your interests first, that's a standard that they're held to, rather than being able to kind of promise something up front and then not be held to that standard if unfortunately something went wrong.
How can people get in touch with your department for any advice, to access resources?
Yeah, so there's a lot of material on our website, which is dol.gov/EBSA. But you can also just call us. That toll-free number I mentioned, it's 866-444-3272.
It's a community hub, a refuge, and a support center. The Watts Labor Community Action Committee is celebrating 60 years of grassroots activism. Maria Hall Brown went to meet Timothy Watkins and see all that this center does to fully realize the Watts community.
Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. The WLCAC was founded in 1965, unfortunately burned down, but fortunately rebuilt after the LA Rebellion of 1992. The man who created the whole thing, Ted Watkins. Today, his son continues on with his mission with pride and passion and love. I'm delighted to be joined by Tim today. So great to have you here.
Thank you. Same here.
Obviously, this is incredibly personal, given the fact that your father was the person that created it in the first place. So what did you see as a young man with the LACAC and your father and the community and everything this place offers growing up?
I learned to find joy in a place of despair by learning to appreciate the remarkable hope that people have. The community really has unlimited potential.
What are some of the things that you are now able to offer the community? It seems the scope of programs that happen here are pretty robust. So what are some of the things that you're really excited about right now?
Oh, every day I can't wait to get to work. I live 4 minutes away from here down the street. I'm up and out, and I never know what I'm going to encounter. Services for the homeless, for seniors, for the indigent and economically poor people, whatever kinds of needs they have, whether it's food or transportation or housing, we're in the business of finding solutions, and that's what we do. Today, my focus and my personal passion goes to developing rent-to-own housing. It's a different take. A lot of people don't believe that it can be done, but I want to do hundreds of them in a multifamily setting so that the people that we move into those units that will eventually own them are from the communities of greatest need. People that were formerly incarcerated or at war in a foreign land, or in some cases homeless by, accident. They fell, they hurt their hip, and in the process of healing, lost everything.
So how is that going to work? Are you purchasing properties that are, multifamily properties?
No.
How is your dream being realized?
So we call the project 2,000 watts.
Okay.
To actually depict the number of units we're going to build.
Okay.
2,000 units of very affordable housing with 20% rent to own. And so these 400 units will be scattered throughout the 2,000. But we're looking for a legal way to add a layer of specificity to the kind of people that we want to move in these units for people in great need.
Your whole conceit about artists is fascinating to me. First of all, we're surrounded by breathtaking art in this room, but it's all over this complex. Everywhere
Yes.
you go, there's sculpture and there's painting and there's work. What do you think the artist brings to a community that actually directs you to want to have them in?
It's what the world needs now. To put it in Dionne Warwick and Burt Bacharach's words, it's what the world needs now. It's love, it's peace, it's passionate, constructive, peaceful communication. That every piece of art you have seen here. And you can't even see it all because it's so much of it that when you're looking at it sometimes, you don't realize, oops, that's another piece of somebody's artwork. That, the world's most powerful leaders are communicating through destruction and violence. And in communities like Watts, artists that would otherwise probably be worse off find a way to eke out an existence, even though they're part of a starving category, because there's a tolerance and acceptance for alternatives to war and violence.
I know that one of the critical components of this wonderful facility is job training and job placement and, education for, particular careers. What is that program and what are you proud that you've been able to accomplish there?
So we've got the job training and development, and in that area we get a lot of people back to work that have been long-term unemployed or hard to employ. In fact, WLCAC itself considers that part of its employment policy, that we care about getting people back to work because we think nothing solves poverty like a job. So we hire locally. 80% of our workforce lives within walking distance. Senior services, close to 2,000 meals a day delivered to people hot and ready to eat, people that can't otherwise get out and get to food the way they would like. Sometimes the only people they actually see in their lives are the people that deliver those services. We've got a 2.5-acre farm in the middle of what's been declared a food desert, and through that we give out close to 40,000 pounds of food every month, free of charge. But we also are growing food at that farm, and we're in the process now in pre-development of building a culinary center that can teach people how not only to grow food, but to gather it and prepare it and consume it in a healthier manner than they're currently doing, because we have the enrichment division, which does all the things that you've noticed in this building with glass blowing and ceramics firing and sublimation, embroidery, silk screening, movie and music production. All the different things that we do here is because we believe that all the other things we do with homeless services and so on, that only gets to 3/4 of the human being.
Right.
That service side, it's when they can express themselves creatively and constructively that their souls begin to heal, and they begin to see each other as contributors to the better side of the community.
Sure. What can people do to help you? I mean, what do you need? You're doing so much and you're tackling a lot of major issues, concerns, and programs. What can people do to help you?
2 things.
Okay.
We have a website that talks about all the things that we do. You can get more information there. It's at www.wlcac.org.
Okay.
There's a donation button there, and I don't know how to say, I'm not asking for donations, but I'll tell you, we've never done a fundraiser in 60 years. And only within the last year or so, we put a donation button on our site, because so much of what I described to you, that is city, county, state, federal funded programming, so much of it comes with far less than half of what it needs to actually function properly. But just learn about us, and there are plenty of opportunities. We have a volunteer coordinator. You can call us and we'll get you involved.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
It's nice to have had this opportunity so that you could realize that it was 25 years.
Thank you.
And keep up the good work, and I hope you let me come back and learn more about how all of this is progressing, because you've done so much, but I can see by what you've told me this afternoon that you're taking another very long road to do a lot more.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.